we're going to look at 2019 product costing question, right? Now, from what you've sent me back today, everyone's okay with part A and everyone's okay with part B. So the problem, so what I've started with, right, I said A and B, there were no problems. So what you've done from part A and B, you ended up in your production in department X, this is your total cost, and in your production department Y, this is your total cost. So the problem started really with part C and D. So in part C, it asks you to select a suitable overhead absorption rate. So how are you going to include these in your cost of pricing the product? So you have to come up with some way. So you're either going to use machine hours, how long they were on the machines for, you're going to use how many hours labour was working on them, or you're going to use the number of units. Now, you're going to have to select in the exam which one you think is most appropriate for department X and which one is most appropriate for department Y. So they always say that you select dominant activity. Now, if you look at your question, right, and we're looking at table 2 of your exam, and I'm going to look at the machine hours and the labour hours. If you look at production department Y, there was 40,000 hours of labour used and 3/4 of them was used in production department Y. So based on that, I would definitely say this department seems to be labour intensive, okay? Looking at the machine hours, in total, there was 80,000 machine hours and over half of them was used in production department X. So I would say I would be best to use machine hours for those. Now, you have to be very, very careful. When you're working out your overhead absorption rate, you're using the machine and labour hours for the whole year. So if I was doing the overhead absorption rate for the production department X, it would be the total cost, and I've decided to use machine hours, so it's number of machine hours. So looking at this, your total cost I have here is 605,200. Now again, you have to use machine hours for the whole year, and machine hours for the whole year for the production department, sorry, what am I on? For the production department X is 48,000 hours. So that will give me an answer here of 1261 per machine hour. Now it's important to write that down for yourself even, because if not you're going to get mixed up. And the overhead absorption rate that I would use for the production department Y, so it's the total cost. Now you don't have to write the formula if you know it, you can just fill it in straight away, but if you're not sure of it, put it in for a while. And we decided here to use your labour hours. Okay, so our total cost here is 391,550, and again you're going to use your labour hours for the whole year in production department Y, which was 30,000. So my answer here again, just take it from here, is 1305 per labour hour. And again, I want you to write down per labour hour, because if not you're going to get confused when you go on to do part D. So that's very simply how you do part C. Make sure you select the correct dominant activity. Sometimes if you look at the solution, because you're going to be using the solution for yourselves here, if you look at the solution, sometimes they say that the 2 activities that are dominant, so they'll accept both using labour hours and machine hours, but I definitely think here this one's definitely machine, and for me this is definitely labour hours. Right, let's look at part D. So they want the selling price of this specific job. Now, when you're doing this part D, right, they mention the job number 925. That means the table that you're going to use in this part of the question is a table for job 925, which is the bottom table. So they say for this job, the materials that you will use are 8,500 in department X, and the total materials you use in department Y is 3,800. So your total materials there are 12,300. Okay, your labour, it says you will spend 3,000 euro on labour in production department X and 4,900 in the production department Y. So that's 7,900 on labour. And you can total the two of them there and you get 20,000. And when you add your materials and your labour, that actually can be called your prime cost. Now your production overheads, how are we going to put these costs in? Those, the production overheads in Department X, we're going to base on how many hours machines were running in Department X for this job. So if you look at this job in Department X, the machines were running for 100 hours. Okay, so the machines were on for 100 hours, and every hour the machines were on, it'll cost you €12.61 per machine hour. So you're going to multiply that by 12.61. So that'll give you 1,261. Then for your production department Y, we're basing it on labour hours. So for this job, how many hours of labour were used in this job? There was 200 hours of labour. And we're basing these on how many hours the labour was going, and that was multiplying by 1305. Okay, so that's 2,610, isn't it? Everyone okay with that? So just be careful when you're doing these to put the production overheads, get them included. You're going to put in 12.61 per machine hour, how many hours the machines were working for. In this specific job, the machines were working for 100 hours. To include production department Y, you're going to include, you're going to charge €13.05 for the number of hours labour were working on the job. And labour was working on the job for 2 hours. Okay, so that gives you 24,071. So what's that? 3871. Now, this is the next part that you need to be a little bit careful of. They tell you that the margin is 20%. Okay, if the margin is 20%, that means that this figure is 100% and this figure is 80%. So if this figure is 80% and you're looking for 20, so what you'll do is 24,071 divide by what you have, which is 80. So you divide by 80 and you want 20, so you multiply by 20 and you get 6017.75. And add the two of them together and you get the total cost of this job. So you believe this job will cost 30, or you will quote that figure if someone wants that job. Okay, so again, the most difficult part here is this. But again, just go back on it again. Your production overheads. You decided to use machine hours here. So the rate is 12.61 per machine hour. Machines were running for 100 hours on this job. For production department Y, you decided to use labour hours. So it's 13.05 per labour hour, and this job, labour was on it for 200 hours, and that's why I multiplied by 200. Okay, and the rest of it, you should be okay. Now, part E, explain why it is necessary to transfer the service department overheads to the production departments and distinguish between allocation, apportionment, and absorption of costs. So if you look at your solutions, the solution there is done out for you on that, and you just need to learn it. Actually, do you know what? I might summarise it quickly for you just to help you with them. Okay, part E, just very quickly to go through this. This question, part E, comes up quite a lot. Okay, why do you have to split your service departments into the production departments? Now, when you're thinking of a service department, I want you to think of our school, and I want you to think of it as first to sixth years are all different departments. So you have department for 1, department 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Think of our secretaries, right? We have secretaries at the front of school and they all have to be paid. So how do we know how much we charge each job for part of the secretaries? So that's a problem. So service departments cannot recover their costs. The secretaries, we can't recover their costs, but we need to include them in the cost price, okay? So service departments must be transferred in an equitable way. Now that word equitable way is really important. Okay, you have to have equitable way due to production departments. So if the secretaries in, say, the school is our factory, and the secretary's wages were maybe just, we'll say, 300,000, we have to decide, we have 6 departments, right? Because I said every year head is a department. We have to decide how much of that 300,000 goes into each department. So that's what we're doing. So we must transfer the secretaries or the service departments in an equitable manner into the production departments. Why? You have to do that so we can recover the costs. Okay, so that overheads can be recovered. You need to use that word recovered. Now, we've seen, and you did this with me in the last few weeks, there is 3 different ways we can recover the costs. You can allocate them. So just say, for example, we know that Liz only works for Department 1. She only works with the first years. So that's very easy to say, Liz, all of your expense is totally allocated to Department 1. So that's how we allocate. So overheads can be easily identified to a particular department. So we know that Liz only works with Department 1, so that's easily identified, so we just charge it to that department. That's the easiest one. The apportionment, we cannot specifically identify the cost to any specific department. So what we're going to do is we're going to base it on maybe the number of people that work in each department. I'm going to split it between that. So shared between departments on a basis of apportionment. So again, you've done that in this question, and you can base them on floor space, number of employees, volume, what's the other ones that you can use? Number of employees. What else do we have? Oh, machine maintenance, depreciation, book value. So again, you can, with the apportionment, the problem is we can't specifically identify the cost to a particular department, so we're going to base it on apportionment, split it between them. The last one that again, we don't know how to put the costs in. So costs will be charged to cost centres of products in order to be recovered, and we base them on a dominant activity, which is the overhead absorption rate. So we'll use an overhead absorption rate, we'll base it on a dominant activity, and I gave an example, I could use labour hours, and up here obviously I gave an example for floor space. Now this question, right, is worth 80 marks, but 12 out of the 80 is for theory. Now 12 out of 80, just very quickly, just to do that, that's 15% is for your theory. You have to learn your theory. It is so important. Okay, so again, I would learn that off by heart. There's no deviation. They don't allow you to use your own words in accountancy. They need equitable way. They need the word to be recovered. You can't identify where the cost came from. So so this one we could identify it. This one we can't identify it. So keep using the word identified as well. Hopefully that has solved all your problems with that question.